Hi everyone, it's Danny. Okay, so one of the most frequently asked questions that I get is how to and when to water different types of orchids, and I don't actually have a video on that. So I decided to make a sort of a series in which I show you different species and varieties of orchids, how I water them, and when I water them, and of course a few tricks to know if your orchid needs water or not. So today we will start with Vanda orchids. Now, Vandas are really beautiful orchids, and everybody pretty much wants to have at least one in their collection. The bad thing with the Vanda orchids is that they can be a bit tricky to grow in a normal home, where you don't benefit from high humidity all the time. And this is because usually Vanda orchids come in a sort of a basket without any media. And this can be quite tricky to water, and you need to water quite often. So I will start by showing you how I actually water my Vanda orchids. I grow them in a home that does not have high humidity all the time, but the good thing is that most hybrids you can find freely available at local garden centers are really adapted to withstand low humidity. Okay, so first off, I do keep my Vandas hanged. I don't keep them potted in any way, and they don't have any potting media, so that means that I need to water them daily. The way to know that your Vanda orchid needs some water is to take a look at the roots. If all the roots are silvery, this means they are dry. Whenever a Vanda orchid is dry, it can actually use some water. Vanda orchids do drink quite a lot of water. Now, I water my Vanda orchids early in the morning in the winter time, and that's pretty much it. I water them once a day. In the summertime, when temperatures are higher, I actually water them twice a day whenever I have time. If not, I do water them at least once a day. To water my Vandas, I usually keep 1 or 2 buckets full of water in my balcony at all times. And what I do is, early in the morning, I simply dunk the orchid with all its root system into the bucket. The most important thing is to actually cover all the root system. You don't need to soak the entire orchid. So I just leave this Vanda be in water for about 15 minutes and I go along do my other chores. After about 15 minutes, the Vanda should be well watered and soaked and hydrated. When you will pull it out, you will actually notice that the root system is not silvery or gray anymore. It is actually green. This means your Vanda orchid does not need any water. So if your Vanda has really green, moist roots, then you shouldn't water it. You should wait until the roots dry off. After I water my Vanda, I simply place it back in its pot. As you can see, I keep it hanged and there is no potting media around the roots. There is a bit of Spanish moss to hold in a little bit more moisture, but for 2 years now I've kept them without any Spanish moss, and this is how I watered them. As I said, I water my Vandas at least once a day with the dunking method, and for the last 2 years everything seems to be fine, and I had quite a lot of blooms from my Vanda orchids. I have to mention here that I don't have any hard-to-keep species. I only have hybrids, and they seem to do very well in my environment, even though it's not a very humid environment. Some growers prefer to keep their Vandas in big glass vases or decorative pots like this without any media. This has the benefit of actually retaining more moisture inside this container. The bad thing about it is that it is not very well ventilated. So when you water your Vanda and keep it like this, you need to make sure that all the water in between the leaves is pretty much dried off until nighttime. In this case, you need to water your Vanda whenever the roots are dry. This can be every other day or every 3 days. It really depends on your environment. But if you keep your Vanda like this, always make sure that in between the leaves there isn't any water stuck, because this can lead to some rotting. Keeping a Vanda hanged can keep you pretty safe from any rotting. I've never had any trouble with it. But if it's not properly ventilated, you can indeed have some issues with rotting in between the leaves and in the crown. Whatever your preferred method is, try to make sure there is never any water left in the crown. If there is any water in the crown and in between the leaves, make sure you take it out with a paper napkin. Also, smaller Vanda orchids, smaller varieties, can be kept in a potting media. But if you try to do this, I suggest you use a very loose potting media. The best one that I can think of is actually bark chips. Don't try to keep a Vanda orchid in sphagnum moss. Vanda orchids like a lot of ventilation, and their roots can rot very easy if they don't have ventilation. The safest way, in my opinion, is the most hassling one, and this is keeping your Vanda orchids hanged and watering them once a day. Okay everyone, hope you enjoyed this and you found this helpful. If you have questions for me or suggestions for videos, just leave me a comment down below and I'll get back to you. And if you'd like to see more videos from me, don't forget to subscribe. If you just want to stay in touch with me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and you have all the links below. I'll see you next time. Bye!